Welcome to the Sports Card Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Big Ken. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a streaming service, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll be notified whenever I drop any new content. Welcome. Thanks for being here. Happy NFL season eve. It's funny. I remember saying on an episode back, must have been February, that it's football's over and what are we going to do, and now all of a sudden it's back again. Can't believe summer's over, right? Football season's getting started, but I mean we get started with a great game tomorrow, like Eagles in Dallas, and it's going to be a fun season for sure. This episode is like a special midweek edition. um you know I don't know what I was thinking with the holiday on Monday. All of a sudden I was doing something today and I'm like, I've got to put an episode out today as promised. So I had to get working on this. And I'm used to doing the hobby chop during the week, not sports card lessons. So yeah, it's a little different this week. Kind of a special treat for you, right? And as promised, you'll get 2 episodes from me. You'll get this one. You'll get another episode on Sunday, and then we'll be back on track next week with the hobby chop, doing the midweek episode. So today's episode, it's an idea I've had since before the National, and I have to give credit where credit is due. A week or so before the National, I met up with my guy, Rich, his Whittlebug Cards, and we were talking about just preparing, getting ready to go out to Chicago, and what our plan was out there. And I talked about selecting a number of cards with a predetermined value that I expected to take with me out there, sell the cards, and use that money for all intent and purposes as spending money for the National. And Rich said, "Your hobby currency." And at that moment, I said, "Here is an episode idea." And not just the idea of bringing cards to sell, to have spending money, but more so just creating hobby currency. A lot like Bitcoin. There are people using high-end computers to mine Bitcoin, right, and actually create Bitcoin. Now, we're not creating cards here, obviously. I mean, we could. There are people who do, but it's really how a lot of people hobby. It's what a lot of people do in the hobby. Um, Whether you're creating hobby currency to invest back into to reinvest back into your collection, similar to Bitcoin mining. In this episode, I'm calling it sports card mining, even though it's really currency mining. It's not cards, but you know, or you're creating hobby currency for an additional source of income, because a lot of people do this full time or do this uh, to make money. Their intent is just to go in and make money. Regardless of your intent, it's still the same outcome, right? I set up at a lot of shows as a dealer, and I get asked a lot, am I trading? But a lot of times, it's kids who are really just trying to get anything they can out of their cards. The first half an hour of the show, they were doing the hobby trade up to get as many cards as they could, and the second half is trying to sell off those cards to see what they'll make, right? We see this at shows, kids just continuously coming up to the table. Are you buying? How much will you pay for this card? But legit deals with trading cards or cards in cash, whether trading up or trading down, they don't happen as much as they used to, at least not for me. But I can honestly say, when I was out at the West Coast Card Show, it reminded me of when I did start setting up as a dealer. And people would show up at my table with a bunch of quality cards, graded, maybe a PSA 9 or PSA 10s, looking to trade up into a bigger card. Um, and I'm trying to say this as politically correct as I possibly can. Um, but it's difficult to make deals when a kid shows up at your table. And I'm saying a kid, it could be anybody, right? With 10 $3 or $4 cards, and they want to trade up into a $50 or a $60 card. I mean, it's hard to make those deals versus somebody shows up at your table with 10 PSA 10 cards worth $100 each, and they want to trade up into an $800 or $900 card. I mean, it sounds like it's the exact same, but it really isn't. It's completely one end of the spectrum to the other. And I saw a lot of this at the West Coast Card Show, and I'm sure it was similar at the National, but I didn't have a table out there, so I can't speak. I can't speak for that. Um, when I was out in Chicago, I was in the mindset of selling, selling off the cards that I had. When I went to West Coast Card Show, I was in the mindset of I want to sell all my football cards. I saved them. I did not bring many of them to Chicago. I brought them to Anaheim. So I didn't get many of those trade up, trade down deals done. I did make some trade deals out there, but not kind of what I'm talking about. But there's a lot of opportunity. A lot of people came up and had really, quality cards in their case that say, hey, look, if you're willing to do dollar for dollar, I'd like to move out of these 9 or 10 $80 to $100 card, and I'd like to get into this one big card there. Earlier in the year, I say May, June, July, I probably would have been more inclined to make some of those deals because I would have had enough time throughout the summer to move these cards. But getting this deal done mid to late August does me no good to kind of bring those cards home, because I think at this point in moving forward, the values on those cards are starting to decline, right? I don't have many shows booked, in the next couple months. So for me, I didn't see the value in taking these cards to kind of put my back against the wall, right? To move them quickly, because that's what would have happened. I would have came back. I would have said, geez, I got to move these cards faster than I normally would. And I don't like to be pressured like that. I'm here to enjoy this. I'm here to, relax as much as I can, have as much fun as I can. And I really don't put myself in a position where I'm like against something and I really have to move it quickly. Sometimes that happens with grading when something takes a long time to come back. And then I'm like I just got this JJ McCarthy card, an auto that I sent off to PSA that was supposed to be back for before the National. And it wasn't. And why I was out in California at the West Coast Card Show, my grade pops, PSA 10, beautiful, but I've missed a couple great opportunities to move that card. Now I've got that card. The season is starting tomorrow, and I'm just hoping if he goes out and flops this week, I could be in trouble with that card, right? This is why I talk all year. Like, I really want to get rid of football before the season starts, because I don't want to have this pressure. I don't want to feel like, I got to move this card quickly. And do I take this? Do I do that? And a lot of times when those situations start, I seem to make mistakes, right? Or I make that sale to somebody, then they get stuck with the card, and then I see them and they're like, oh yeah, that was a great deal. And it's it happens on both ends. So I like to relax. I like to have time to move cards. Don't like this, last minute thing. So yeah, I didn't get many of those deals done, but a lot of people did, and it made sense to a lot of people out there to buy up these cards or make those trades and get those cards. And a number of these people that came to my table, they went off and sold those cards. They created that currency. They showed up at the show with cards. They knew what they wanted to do. They wanted to sell out of those or trade out of those into something bigger. They went off and sold those cards. Then they came back and bought the card they wanted, right? It's the same thing. At the end of the day, they're still getting the card they wanted, and they still created the currency to purchase that card, whether it was using cards for a card or selling those cards to other people and then coming back um, and buying the card. Now, in that case, was it dollar for dollar? Probably not. Probably not on there. It's probably, you know, everybody's buying at 85%, right? No matter who's out there now and is setting up these buying stations at these shows, it's 85%. So dollar for dollar on a card, if they're coming out and saying, "Hey, I have, you know, $900 in cards, you know, we trade those for this $800 card or 850, you know, probably if it sat down and I did those percentages, it turned out that they probably had to sell a few more cards or reach in their pocket to get that done versus a dollar for dollar card. But at the end of the day, what are they doing? They're creating hobby currency. Um, And it's also amazing, and I'm starting to hear this more and more over the years. I've had people on, I've interviewed people, and they've talked about, you know, being in the hobby for many years, having cars that the value exploded, and you know, doing other things outside of the hobby with that currency. And it's amazing how many collectors um, that have been collecting cards for years and decide, I'm going to sell some of these cards, maybe pay some bills, maybe a college tuition payment for their child, put an addition on their house, buy a car, take a vacation. So many different things that I've heard people that have been sitting on these cards that say it's time to move, and knowing they've had this hobby currency, right, in their house all this time, now they're cashing out, right? And they could cash out anytime on some of those cards. They're putting those cards, you know, back into circulation, or they may go right into somebody else's PC, depending on who buys it and where it goes. But you know, again, it's hobby currency. It's something they've acquired or purchased years ago that now they've taken out and they're doing, you know, something big, maybe even life changing with that money. Um, I was just looking at my PSA orders that I sent back in June, beginning of June. It was almost some may have been the end of May, but definitely in June. And one of those orders was a 22 card order of all Don Russ, whether they're rated rookies or the insert cards on there. And when I went back, I'm like, God, I don't even remember sending this back, this order in, or having these cards, or you know what my mindset was behind it. But then when I thought about it, I'm like, you know, these cards aren't due back until October. Um, when they do come back, and hopefully they grade well. Hopefully, I'm getting some tens out of there. And it's not the ideal time to be getting football cards back, right? But at the end of the day, there's still value in those cards, right? Raw, those cards would just sell for a couple dollars. And I know I've got probably a 2-row box of just this year of the quarterback, the rated rookies, the quarterbacks, right, in there. And I know they don't sell for very much at all. But if these get tens, right, they could sell upwards of $50 to $75, you know, after a $19 grading fee plus shipping and taxes. You know, I can sell those cards, right? More hobby currency, right? I can take that money, I could reinvest it into something else. Um, and I talk a lot about buying cards now to sell at a later date, um, or get graded and then sell at a later date. And those cars to me, it's like a stock, right? That I'm waiting for it to mature. Do they all mature? No, no, they don't. Not all of them do, but year after year, I'm getting better at identifying the right players to buy. And for me, you know, my hobby currency as far as selling cards that I've acquired, there's a range in that. They can arrange it ranges from maybe selling those cards next week or next month, all the way to 3.5 years and some beyond that, right? And I know most people think I'm crazy when I'm doing this, but for me, like, it's like a short-term PC, right? There's another perfect. There's another episode right there, the short-term PC. You'll probably see that down the road. Um, but especially with these college players, um, getting these cards, uh, and holding them and knowing when is the right time to sell those cards, especially with the women's college basketball. I've done very well with Caitlin Clark. I've done very well with Paige Beckers. I've done very well with a handful of other. I've lost out on some other ones that didn't do as well, right? But sitting on a lot of Juju Watkins and Sarah Strong and freshmen and juniors and sophomores and missing a year and NIL deals. Who knows when they're going to get out of college and their first pro uniform cards are going to come out, but that seems to be the time, before when they're planning to leave, when they're going to be the first round draft pick or the top pick in a draft, is to move those cards then, right? And then try to reinvest that into what could turn into a longer term PC, right? The professional cards, because we know at the end of the day, even though, like with Caitlin Clark, and I'm going to say this, and I know people will agree with me, that college cards have really held their value. But beyond her, and I think Paige Beckers, I'm starting to see there's a lot of value in some of her college cards too, the autograph. I'm seeing some people posting up prices on these, and I'm looking, and I'm like, wow, is that really selling for that much still? And I'll go look it up. I'll comp the card and be like, wow, it really is. So there are certain players that their college cards are going to hold the value, right? But I think at the end of the day, I think the pro uniform card, their rookie card, and the pro uniform is probably going to hold the most value. Even these other, I'm going just rolling back to PSA. These other orders I have at PSA, I think there's 5 or 6 other orders out there that won't be back till October or November. Um, a lot of those cards coming in, a lot of them were football, not the top end football, anything top end. Like I wanted to get out before August, but and not only football, but a lot of NCAA. I opened up a lot of Bowman U Chrome basketball boxes. There's a lot of NCAA players in there. Um, a lot of that stuff, because I hope at that time of year, right, that's going to be my currency, that December, January, February, running up to March Madness. Taking all that money, right, reinvest it all back into football, which I'll be buying January through March, right? It's just to me, it's kind of a rinse and repeat. I'm excited that I found a way, I found another lane to create that money. That I don't want to keep saying the hobby currency. You're probably tired of me saying it already, but just to create that 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 lane to be able to take that money and just reinvest into something else, and then the following year do it again and do it again and just and keep it going. Um, because the football I'm going to be buying, I've talked about this year after year. I won't be selling that till June or July. And in the last couple of years, it's really been into July. June really hasn't been that good with football. So it seems like July and August are the 2 best months to be selling the football. And I know people question all of this, my intentions, right? Is this a hobby? Is this a business? It seems like both. What's going on? What are we doing, right? But I try to do as much in this space to be self-sufficient as I possibly can. Not only for what I'm doing with card shows and traveling, um, and grading the cards I'm grading and the wax I'm ripping, and even the expenses for this podcast, right? Um, when I jumped back in, I made initial investment. Probably the first year or two in, I added more to the initial investment. But at this point, it just keeps rolling. I just keep it rolling. And as long as I can keep it rolling and creating these things, different lanes to create a little bit of income just to keep everything, the expenses and adding to my PC and all that without reaching into my pocket, right? It's a beautiful thing. And I mean, at the end of the day, that's what I'm here for, right? We all have our own lane in the hobby. I completely understand. But I think even though we all have our own lane, I think we're all trying to figure out a way to make the hobby self-sufficient or, make it a career, a source of income. I mean, I've talked to so many people who say, I do this to make a car payment. This way I can drive a fancy, a nice truck or a nice car or whatever. I do this for a mortgage. I do this for, I'm putting this money away for something else, kids' college or whatever. It's just we're all, and a lot of kids doing this. I'm starting to hear that a lot, which I mean, it's great to hear is that parents are they're investing in their children in this hobby, but the child is investing in themselves, uh, you know, for in a college fund, right? Putting money away, also building credit, parents helping them build credit, to do, to figure out the, you know, running a business, right? Overhead and expenses and this and that and paying bills and things like that. So there's a lot more that's coming out of this than just being happy, right? And being a hobby and just having fun. There's so many more things coming out of this, and I think a lot of people have figured out a lot of ways to create income out of this. And you know what? That's if we can make this self-sufficient, right? Again, it's a beautiful thing. And if not, if we got to reach a little, we reach a little, like especially me. But at the end of the day, it's just about having fun. Like I said, I will be back Sunday with a brand new episode. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please definitely subscribe. And most importantly, tell a friend and spread the word. Until next time, take care of yourselves and everyone around you.